Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting live stream for this week's Genesis Scottish Open. Going to break down what to expect from course conditions and get you ready for lock this evening to go out there, enter some DFS lineups, and of course get to some of your prop exposure as well. So we'll start it off with a look at the course, a little weather reports to make sure we're ready out there before lock, and then afterwards go through the DFS and prop side of things in that exact order. So just to give you guys an idea of what is to come out there. But first off, welcome on in. Say hi down there in chat as you guys are funneling in here, and smash the like button as well. You got Chris down there who says he set notifications so he wouldn't miss this. That is the thing to do. Love to have you here. What's going on? Sean Allen with some questions. We'll talk about specific player questions a little bit later. We've got David down there, Antonio, my boy Brian down there, and RevCloud. Hopefully you guys are having a solid Wednesday night. And I know a lot of you might not be waking up early, but I'm going to be doing this live stream, building my lineups, kind of finalizing that, and then going directly to bed because, you know, I got to wake up around lock and take a look at things from the prop side of things. So it'll be an early morning for me. And like I said, excited to get after it for this week. Got Steven down there. Yeah, it's going to be crazy for me. I'm honestly just going to get used to it this weekend. So when we have the Open Championship next weekend, my body's all acclimated. What's going on, Bart? Barry down there, Ian, and hopefully you guys are having a solid week. So let's start it off with a look at the weather. We've got my cat making a guest appearance back there, it looks like. And let's take a look at this golf course. So first off, this track played really different the last few years. Last year, you had Rory win at 15 under par, a slightly under par scoring average. And then the year before that, it was a well over par scoring average, and Xander winning at only -7. So this course can be drastically impacted by weather. And I think towards the beginning of this week, we're going to see a lot of what we saw for last year, which was better scoring conditions for the first 3 days outside of Sunday, where there were 40 to 50 mile an hour winds. You may remember that there was a chance they couldn't even play out there on Sunday. So great to see that the scoring conditions were still under par despite that, because out there 2 years ago, they were just blown off this golf course. So over the last few days, they've gone quite a bit of rain. This track is going to be extremely soft for at least the first round, probably the first 2 rounds out there. And with low winds, and especially low winds towards the afternoon tomorrow, and then on Friday, if we take a look ahead there, pretty much no wind the entire day. I mean, you're going to see somebody likely 10, maybe even like 11, 12 under par after the first few rounds. So unlike what we saw there 2 years ago, where this was much more about grinding it out, a lot about around the green, those, major championship type of stats. I've heard a few caddies this week mention that they think it might be a birdie fest. In fact, one of them said that they think the winner is going to be well over 20 under par. So I would take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, they get things wrong just like all of us. But if they think that it's going to be scoreable out there, that tells you that there's probably at least a few low scores to be had. So I would say that the scoring conditions are likely going to favor some of the longer players, as a soft, wet golf course is likely going to play a little bit longer. And considering that the approach profile around here is already skewed towards the longer end of the spectrum, you add in a little bit of softness, you take away the rollout off the tee, and I think it's going to play even more so into the bomber's hands. So historically, this could play as a harder link style course. I think that's where you see a lot of the European style players popping. This week, when we get the softer, longer kind of golf course, I think that's going to favor that more American style of golf. So it's worth setting the tone there in terms of like the kind of players I was looking for. But in terms of looking at it from a wave by wave standpoint, I think that the PM AM wave is going to get the better side of the draw. So by PM AM, right, I mean PM on Thursday and then AM out there on Friday. The later starters out there for tomorrow or tonight for all of us over here in the United States look to have slightly lower winds as the day goes on. On top of that, it's going to get a little bit warmer as the day goes on as well. So I think we could probably see about a half a stroke advantage right there. And then when we take a look at Friday, and by the way, this ECM model is the most accurate over here in Europe, you'll see that it's pretty much flat the entire day. And while it is going to be warmer in the afternoon than it is in the morning, you don't have that same kind of wind split where maybe the last 3-4 hours of play are going to be played under extremely calm conditions. So when I take a look at this, and if we just go through some of the other models, you'll see that that same kind of idea is kind of backed up. So we go over here to Thursday. You can see this model is pretty flat for the entire day. So I would say that this one is probably just a 50-50 split. But if we go through a few of the other ones here, you'll see that same kind of advantage. Though it's tiny, this one does slightly favor the PM guys out there for Thursday. This icon model, same thing. Again, it's nothing massive, right? It's like a 3-4 mile an hour difference. But if we're going to get the higher temperatures and the lower winds, right, the tamer conditions out there in the PM, I think that's probably about a half a stroke advantage. So just to go through this last model that we have, the UKV, it's probably the most severe out of all the models that we've looked at towards favoring that PM wave. So it's not like I'm favoring that PM AM wave in all of my lineups or for all of my exposure. But when I looked through my player pool about maybe a half an hour ago, I think I was like 75% PM AM and about 25% for the AM PM. So it did make quite a big difference out there in my pool. And it wasn't that I was like only looking for those PM wave players. It was that when I was trying to break ties, trying to figure out who to play between a few players, if it was that close where I had to just, kind of decide between the two, if one was AM and one was the PM player, I went with the PM option. So I think that's how you should handle it this week. Maybe you want to correlate a few lineups to try and lean into any kind of weather edge that you can find. But I think where it's most useful this week is going to be with your cheaper players, those 6, 7, even 5K range players that you're mixing in to go out there and get some leverage. Up top with your 8, 9, 10K plus options, I don't think you have to try and get too cute about it, right? For example, guys like Xander, Rory are going to be players that are going off early tomorrow. I don't think that you have to fade them only because of the fact that they're in the quote-unquote bad wave out of the two. So I do think that there could be something there, right? Always worth pointing out from the main slate perspective. However, I don't think it's the type of advantage that you can just lock it in and count on it 100% of the time. So definitely keep an eye on this forecast if you decide to stay up tonight, right? If you're going to be somebody that just stays up until 2 a.m., maybe you're a West Coast person, right? That's only like 11 p.m. local for you. Really keep an eye on that forecast. If it's going to be that advantage for the PM guys here today, then definitely try and look at that for your DFS lineups. Let me go ahead, share our screen. We'll circle into the DFS side of things now and start to talk about some strategy. So the way that I do this here on my live streams, if you guys are new here, is if you have any questions, any specific players you want me to deep dive, just let me know down in the chat, right? That's what the live chat's for here, to go over all of those specific concerns that you have. Outside of that, I've got some favorite plays that I'm going to go through. So a few ownership numbers that I threw on here that would normally have been blacked out, and then a few plays that I didn't mention on my DFS and betting preview out there on Monday. So maybe a few players that caught my eye as the week went on. In a few cases, a few players that are maybe lower owned than what I was expecting, or guys that based on the changing course conditions with it being so soft, so scoreable, especially out there on Friday, that maybe are popping a little bit more now. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to go through some of my top plays. And then, like I said, any of your questions as we go through this. So let's catch up, see what's going on. And Sean, who was asking about a few guys for a last man in. So it was Power, Nakajima, or Novak as your last man in. So a lot of that will depend on the rest of your lineup, Sean, and your objective for your last man in. If you really need to get different, I think the option there is Nakajima, right? He's the lowest owned out of the top three. If you're just going based on projection, it's probably Andrew Novak. If you're trying to kind of blend the two together, try and take somebody who's kind of low owned but still projects well, then that's Seamus Power. I actually like Seamus Power probably the most out of the three, but he's not the lowest owned out of any of those options, and he's not the best projected play either. That would be Andrew Novak out of those three players. So it kind of depends. I could see a time and spot for playing all three of them, Sean. For me personally, I like Seamus Power the most. That's just because I play GPPs though. And yeah, he's like one of those perfect kind of flyer plays that makes sense for this kind of golf course, but is relatively low end and you can get some leverage there. So that's why I like him. What's going on, Alan? Thoughts on Corey Connors? He seems a little bit priced up, so maybe the ownership will be low, you're asking. I tend to agree with that. I do think he's maybe a little bit more expensive than he should be, and you can see that reflected with a lot of his ownership numbers. And yeah, there's been crickets on him. I haven't really heard anything about Corey Connors myself. So I can tell you right now that I've got him lower owned than guys like a Matt Fitzpatrick, about the same kind of ownership as guys like a JT, marginally higher owned than somebody like a Brian Harmon. So I wouldn't call him like a diamond in the rough. Like he's not going to be sub 6%. Like he's not going to be a 5%er. out there in GPPs, but about 10% ownership is likely where he's going to come in, which, I think he has some upside, but I have to admit, I'm not the biggest Corey Connors fan because he doesn't post a lot of top 5 finishes. At $8,900, you might not need a top 5 finish to be optimal, but you almost certainly need a top 10 finish. And it's not like Corey is incapable of posting a top 10 finish. It's just not something that he does with enough regularity for me to love him as a DFS play. So I actually like him more for cash. If you were playing a smaller field contest where it's more about your floor, you're really trying to min cash, then maybe a play Corey Connors, because I think he has a lot of that safety to him. He's got a very high floor, very consistent player. However, the lack of upside is reflected with the lack of his consistency, I should say, kind of limits the upside, right? A lot of those guys that are steady eddies, they don't get too high, they don't get too low. The byproduct of that is, though the low isn't very low, the high sometimes isn't as high as what you'd be looking for. So that's the argument with Corey Connors, is that he's probably better for contests where you're not playing against 20, 30,000 entries, would be my recommendation with him. Can I do a breakdown of the Wiesberger? So yeah, I actually haven't seen him playing a lot recently. He was on the Live Tour for a little bit on the Cleeks, I believe, before getting sent back to the DP World Tour. I'm not sure how the form has been. I know it's been at least good enough that people are playing him this week, and he's won at this golf course before. So if you look at the Scottish Open when it was a DP World Tour event, Bernd Wiesberger won this when it was a birdie fest, when it was won at 22 under par. And though it was changed from a par 71 to a par 70 since then, so, the winning score that year was actually like minus 18 if they're playing it like they're going to this year. I think we're going to see that same kind of scoring, if not slightly better, because of the strength of field. So maybe he's a good fit for that, right? The last time this course played easy, he was a player that was out there shining and got the job done. So he's not my favorite play. I'm not getting there myself. Again, just full transparency out here, but that would be the argument for him, right? Former winner. He's been okay recently, which, again, he's kind of old and washed up. So the fact that he's still playing well is kind of mind-boggling. What's going on, David Favor? He said, what are my thoughts on Eric Cole? So I would say that Eric Cole is a player that I'm a little bit more bullish on than most. I think that, the rookie of the year last year, the consistency, all those made cuts that he had was extremely impressive. But I think even an Eric Cole stan like myself would have to admit that this year hasn't been that consistent for him. He's been missing some cuts. He hasn't had as many of those top 20 finishes, but we have gone recently has been a solid stretch of form. So just to go over the last 12 measured rounds, which for Eric Cole has been probably the best stretch of form he's had all year, he's gaining in every category but off the tee. And last year, when we would check up an Eric Cole's stat profile, this is exactly what it would look like, right? He was never gaining off the tee. His best weeks or his best stretches of form, he'd be about a neutral player in that category, but back to being elite in the 3 categories from fairway in. So your approach, around the green, and putting, right? He's a top 20 player in every single category. That's huge. So the fields have been weaker. I think that kind of plays into that, right? You've got to consider that when you're looking at the shots gained metrics. But Eric Cole appears to be back. So if you're a buyer in on that, it's I don't think it's the greatest course fit, but he's playing a lot better, and he looks like the Eric Cole from last year, which at that kind of price tag would be a steal. So for sure, I think he's in play. Decky or Minwoo to pair up with Xander. So I'm a huge Minwoo guy this week. That doesn't mean that I hate Decky at all. I think that he's definitely in play at this kind of golf course, but Minwoo has won at this golf course before. So kind of like Wiesberger has shown it before when this was a DP World Tour event. And very sneakily, Minwoo Lee has top 25 in like every single start this year. And I think the only not top 25 that he had was like a T26 finish. So Minwoo has been unbelievably consistent in 2024. And on top of that, has shown form at this golf course. So I love Minwoo. I would, favor him over a Hideki, but I think Hideki's a decent play. He's lower owned than Minwoo. If you're trying to find the lower owned option, that would be Decky. Let's see where we at. Let's have a week. Absolutely, RevCloud. Why isn't Hideki getting any love? That's a good question, right? I mean, he's not playing horribly. The form is decent enough when you look at the raw shots gained metrics. I would say it's likely because there are people around him that people would prefer over somebody like Hideki. That would include a Tom Kim, right? He's got an excellent track record at this course. A Minwoo, same thing, right? I love him this week. A lot of others do as well. Guys like Matt Fitzpatrick have played pretty well here as well. And if we take a look at the course history, Matsuyama didn't play last year, and the year before that missed the cut. So that's probably why people are a little bit hesitant. I say would be the course history, the actual track record here. But I wouldn't let that talk you completely off of him, right? He's a world-class player. In terms of form, he's number 10 in the field in terms of shots gained heading into the event. And considering that there are a few small sample size guys on the DP World Tour that are up there in that top 5 that probably shouldn't be, he's truly like number 6 or 7 on the PGA Tour, at least in this field when it comes to form. So I think that he's in play this week. And the reason for people being hesitant is likely that course history, as we just went through. And we got the cat cam. She's still over there. I guess she's just out of view over here. But yeah, normally she's very shy. She doesn't like the lights. I've got the ring lights on and whatnot, but she's dealing with it today. So we'll let her chill out. Why not, right? What's going on, Jack? You know, you always mention him, but do I think Nakajima could show up? Yes, I do think that Nakajima could show up. In fact, I think he's a pretty solid play for this week. He's low owned. He's a player that you've seen win on the DP World Tour this year. And a lot of people probably don't know that, right? Unless you're somebody that's watching, following the DP World Tour week in, week out, you probably don't know who Kita Nakajima is. If you don't know, I'll just give you a little bit of a Spark Notes version here. He's former world #1 amateur in the world. So up-and-coming young talent that has won on the DP World Tour, has won on the Asian Tour, has won on every single tour that he's played on, hits the ball well over 310 yards through the air, and is a really good iron player. So hopefully that sells you on him, right? He's a stud. And Jack, I know that you're somebody that watches the DP World Tour quite a bit, so you knew all of that, right? What's going on, Kep? Your favorite single entry play? If I had to narrow it down to one guy, it's Minwoo Lee. It's just my favorite play. I think price tag, ownership, all of it makes sense with him. What's going on, James? You have too many questions, but wanted to ask you as far as any low punts. So let's see. So you had Rosner and then Jesper Svensson. So, and then, yeah, not a punt, but McKibben. See, let's start with McKibben. Then I'll answer your question about the 2 punt plays that you mentioned. So McKibben, it seems like people are just a little bit too high on the kid, right? I mean, he's a young up-and-coming prospect. That's the reality with Tom McKibben. Now, he has won internationally, so he's not like somebody that can't go out there and spike. We saw Garrick Higo do that same thing. He was winning internationally, came to the PGA Tour, and then won, right? Won the Palmetto Championship. So there is upside with Tom McKibben, but I feel like he's actually going to get some ownership this week. So I'm not the biggest fan on McKibben. I think long-term, huge fan. I think he's going to be a great talent, but I do think that he's getting enough steam now where it's like, okay, come on, guys. Like he is still like a 22-year-old kid, right? And then with Rosner and Svensson, I don't know as much about Svensson because I haven't been watching the DP World Tour as much this year, but I know that he's been playing really solid golf. He's been very consistent. He's had some top 5, some top 10s here in 2024. So I'm not against playing him at all. There are a few other DP World Tour guys that I'm taking over him, like Antoine Rosner. And excuse me, I was about to burp there, but I didn't want to do that into the mic. That'd be disgusting. But yeah, Antoine Rosner is a guy that I'd rather prefer. Is somebody that I'm actually playing in lineups. He's been posting those top 10s, those top 15s on the DP World Tour. And, you know, if he can do that, I think he's $5,600 this week, then Rosner could make the optimal. So I do think he's a pretty solid option. You're in Scotland and the wind looks the same all day. Yeah, I mean, I'm just showing you the forecast over here. It could certainly be wrong, but you know, I've had people I've talked to in the industry that are sharps themselves also say that they think that PMAM is going to get that advantage. So I guess just to show you, right? Like these forecasts could be wrong, right? But a majority of them do think that the morning is going to be a little bit spicier, and there's some rain in the forecast. So hey, there's a bunch of different forecasts out there, right? Whichever one that you trust the most, Brian, go with. You're a local, so you probably do have that forecast. If you think it's going to be flat all day, then maybe play it pretty flat, right? I'm only using it to like break ties, like to go out there. And if I really can't choose between players, to go out there and do so. And based on the forecast, I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to do. So again, it's your own process. You do your own thing, man. But the forecast that we're looking at, it's not just one, right? It was like 5 out of the 7 had the AM as a little bit spicier. So I'm going to go with that. I appreciate the insight though, as somebody that's local, but I do want to trust the data. Can I deep dive Hideki? He seems pretty low owned. Yeah, so I just gave you that small little take on him before. I think that he's an okay play, right? The form's there. The issue people have with him, like I was saying, is the course history, right? Lack of history, only has that missed cut. And then on top of that, the withdrawal risk. Now, the withdrawal risk is probably something you shouldn't worry about anyways, because it's the same thing as somebody missing the cut, right? It's not really going to make a difference. You're not going to win the large field GPP with somebody that's not finishing top 10. At the same time, though, there are guys around him that I like more, like, for example, Minwoo Lee. So I kind of get why people aren't playing him, but he is low owned. Thoughts on a couple World Tour guys? You got Guerrero, Matthew Jordan, and then, it's those two. So I'm like a 5 out of 10 on both. I honestly don't watch enough of the DP World Tour to give you a very nuanced take on either player. I will tell you that just based on form, Matthew Jordan is having a solid 2024. It's same thing with Guerrero. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm like at a 5 out of 10 on them. A lot of the DP World Tour guys, I think they have some upside this week, but the PGA Tour players are better, right? Let's not kid ourselves. Let's remind ourselves of the tour that's more competitive. And I think a majority of your cheaper plays should be PGA Tour players, but there are a few that I'm playing this week. Like we'll talk about a few here in a few minutes, and you'll get a few that are my favorites. Those two didn't make my list, unfortunately. What's going on, Mark? You said Alex Fitzpatrick. Yeah, he's been playing solid golf. He made it onto the DP World Tour by winning on the Challenge Tour. And then immediately when coming over to the DP World Tour, it wasn't like he was struggling. He like top 25 almost every single week. So yeah, I'm not playing him this week, Mark. There are a lot of DP World Tour guys that I kind of wish I could play, but I've got to keep the player pool pretty concise, pretty, tight on a week like this. I try not to play too many players when we have DP World Tour guys in here. But yeah, he's definitely an option. Let's throw that out there. He's long off the tee too. So that's something that you can't discount. With a longer, softer golf course, I do think it sets up quite well for him. What's going on, Samuel? Homa and Clark turning up this week. I've got myself a Homa outright, so I hope so. Wyndham Clark has low-key been really good here as well. He's gaining about 2 strokes per round around the Renaissance Club. So yeah, give me both of them. I think they're both in play this week. What's going on? He said, how about Ricky Fowler? Yeah, so he's playing well. He's made 7 of his last 10 cuts. I don't think a lot of people would realize that, but he's been making cuts recently. Now, has he been posting those top 5, top 10s? Absolutely not, right? So he's getting back. I don't know if he's fully back, though. The one thing to say about Ricky is that he does love playing these Open Championships, Scottish Open kind of setups, and he's played the Scottish Open forever. I mean, even before this was a DP World Tour, PGA Tour double-sanctioned event, he was out there playing a whole bunch of golf. So I do think that it's a spot where he could get right, but I don't know if I'd count on it. There's not a lot of talk about Harmon. Is he a contrarian play? Per the ownership, he's sub 10%. So I do think that there's something to the low-owned aspect. But if it's a possible birdie fest, probably not the best option. So I would say that the course fit kind of keeps me off of him, but that's why he's going to be low-owned. So if you need to get different, if there's no one in that range that you're comfortable getting to that's also going to be low-owned, then he could be your guy. Like it's not anything that I would drastically hold myself against. That's not like I would be completely against playing Brian Harmon. I will admit that there's another guy in that range I like just a little bit more for some leverage. What's going on, Sam? You said, who is low-owned to play and vice versa? I don't really understand your question based on how you worded that there. So you got to let me know what you're talking about. What's going on, Kep? Are you a psycho for liking Straka? No, you're not. He's playing solid golf. Ball striking stats are what you're looking for with Sep. So are you psycho? No. Do I think that there's a little bit of concern there? Yes. Because the short game, the Open Championship track record, leaves a little bit to be desired. But however, one thing you'll say is that he has a lot of DP World Tour experience. A lot of people that don't follow the DP World Tour probably don't know that he's actually made quite a few starts over there over the last few years. So I think he's in play. The form is solid. And you're definitely not a psycho for wanting to play him. Fitz PM player, a sleeper this week. Yeah, I'm on him. I'm playing him in some lineups, Barry, for sure. And good course history, but recent form sucks. You're spot on with it, right? It's the long-term form, long-term course fit versus the recent form heading in argument, right? It's going to be an age-old argument between people, and you got to figure out what to do. I'm playing him personally, right? If he's going to be low-owned, if he's a guy that you don't have to take in half your lineups to get leverage, then so be it if he doesn't have the best form. If he's going to be in a quarter of my lineups, I'll stomach it if he goes out there and he sucks. because in the past, especially like when this is a DP World Tour event, he killed it at the Scottish Open. So I think that it's not even just the recent stuff. The long-term stuff at this golf course is great. Smash that like button. The IRS owes you money. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Samuel, for saying that. Yeah, smash the like button if you guys haven't already. You're new. What players are considered PM in Scotland? So yeah, great question. The PM guys are going to be starting around like 8, 9 a.m. over here in America, right? So it's going to be over there at like 12 or 1 p.m. local time, something like that. It's the same thing as it would be here in the United States, right? The early guys are going off at like 7 a.m. local time, and your later starters are going to be starting around noon. So it's the same kind of setup as we'd have in America, just obviously different for us because of the time difference. Fade because he'll withdraw. Yeah, that's on Hideki, I'm assuming. Yeah, there's a lot of tilt factor if you decide to play Hideki Matsuyama. Only play him if you're okay if he withdraws. Like if you just like can mentally handle that. Any thoughts on Noren? Been a little bit off, but the course fit and leverage are decent. Yeah, I think he's in play this week. I'm playing him. I'll just tell you that right now. Emin Hala, he's really fits these European style golf tournaments. Like Sepp Straka, he plays a lot of golf on the DP World Tour. And, that's a narrative that you'll hear me spew over and over again. But if you have that plus form, then we're cooking, right? Like, just because a guy plays over there does not mean that he's going to play well this week. But that's not what I'm saying. But, if you look at the form from like 3-4 weeks ago, he was one of the best players on the PGA Tour, right? He was like in that 10K range when we got to weaker field events. Now he's only 7K. He's lower owned, like you're mentioning, and the course fit makes plenty of sense. So yeah, I'm a big Noren guy this week, and I hope he stays low owned because, a few weeks ago, he was the talk of the town. Everyone was playing him at like $9,000, and now he's cheap and there's crickets. So I'll definitely take him. You took Zhao, Thagala, Spieth, Fitz, and for Goblins over Strokes. I don't love that, Omar. I think it's going to play pretty easy. So we're going to talk about props a little bit later, but I don't think that's a smart move. Good evening and let's go Bucks. Couldn't have said it better. Absolutely, man. Who are they playing today, by the way? I want to check that. I'm going to be going to bed, so I probably can't watch it if it's a night game, but let's see. Maybe they already played. And I'm a terrible fan. No, they play at 8:10, and they play the Brewers. Okay. Maybe I'll watch. It'll be watch like the first few innings before I end up falling asleep. Get ready for this golf tournament. Decky and Rai or Minwoo and Sunjae? I prefer the last two, Minwoo, Sunjae. I really like Minwoo this week, and Sunjae is also on my hit list, a player that I'm using. So I'd go with those two. How much Bez is too much Bez? 30-40% is probably too much Bez. If you're going to play him, though, you likely have to play at least 20% to get your leverage. So yeah, I think he's in play, Sam, but he's getting some ownership. So unfortunately, you're going to have to play quite a bit of him. As far as overall just projected outcome here, who would I prefer? So you're just saying like in the big 5-5-5. I was a little bit confused by the wording there, but I kind of see what you're saying. So in the big 5-5-5, who would I prefer between EVR and Ben Griffin? So if you're just looking at pure projection, it's likely Ben Griffin because of the form. A lot of my algorithm for going out there and projecting players, it'll take the course fit angle and then it weighs it about just as much as recent form. So recent form is a pretty big factor in my model. So if you're just using projection, it's likely going to be Ben Griffin. Eric Van Rooyen, however, longer term has slightly higher upside, has a higher ceiling than what you have with guys like Ben Griffin, and long term is probably the better player between the two. So I don't know. I would say if you're a form guy, you go Ben Griffin. If you're a long-term guy, you go Eric Van Rooyen. And personally, like if I was parsing between the two, I'd be going Eric Van Rooyen because he's going to be lower owned than Ben Griffin. And I think that, if you just take away the last few weeks, he's clearly the better player. So that's my take on it. When looking at recent form, what round should take priority, 12 or 24? 12 is a good sense of like what they're doing heading in. 24 is a good sense of like the last month and a half. So if you're like looking at recent form, that's the last 12 rounds, right? 24, I would say is a little bit more than what you want for recent form. You've got Rory versus Xander in the 72-hole matchup. You like Rory and you think he should be like minus 140. I agree with that. I think the only argument against that, and I'm just playing devil's advocate because I'd be betting Rory just like you, would be the mental factor, right? Rory blowing the major championship on the last hole, and how that's gonna, weigh in on him mentally. I'll say from the interviews that he's done, doesn't look like it's weighing on him all that much. So maybe it won't be that much of an issue. Novak with a disrespectful price. Is this a trap? It could be, because he's going to get some ownership. And if you're going to play him this week and you're going to take leverage, you're going to have to play him in at least 15%, maybe even close to like 18 to 20% of lineups. So yeah, it's the perfect trap spot. Now, does that mean that he's not going to play well? Absolutely not. But it does have that written all over it, huh? Right? Mispriced guy that it's a golf course that can take names. I mean, this golf course, by the way, guys, it's hard when it gets windy. If it gets windy Saturday, Sunday, there could be carnage out there. What's going on, Robin? He said, thoughts on the hot rookie players that have played well, like the John Deere and qualified. So I'm a little bit worried about it. So I'm getting your vibe there. You're saying like the new time zone, the link style course, like, are they going to be able to handle that kind of move? I have my same kind of concerns. And the added aspect here, Robin, is that those players that are the hot commodities, the guys that have gotten hot this time of the year, are almost all of the chalk, especially in that 7 and 8K range. The guys that are getting all the attention in lineups, some cases, it's some guys that have good course history, like Benny Ann kind of comes to mind with that. But then outside of that, it's a lot of those guys with the hot hands. So I think that there is some concern there. I'm not as worried about the time difference. I'm not as worried even about the link style of golf. I'm more so worried about them just having the hot hand, right? They're priced up. They're now chalkier than they should be just because they're heading in with form. And they're now priced around players that are better players long-term that are in some cases like half the ownership. So yeah, in general, Robin, I'm fading a lot of those players. Now, there's a few that are leaking into my player pool because, you don't have to get different in all 6 spots. But I do think that's an interesting theory to go through, right? Or whether those guys are, kind of due for a letdown. And I tend to agree with that. Even though Rye got cut last year, he's itching for a win. Yeah, he's played well here, Omar. He won when this was the DP World Tour event. So I don't think that it's a bad week for him at all. What's going on, Jack? You were going back to the young lefty Brit golfer named Sarah Bowstar. So I probably completely, it's not Bowstar. I just completely butchered that name there. But okay, you just checked it. He's in the ISCO championship. Yeah, hey, if he was in this field, he'd be unowned, right? He'd be like 0.1, 0.2% owned. ISCO championship, maybe he can actually top 5 or win that thing. So you're taking him at 80-1. I'll be rooting for you. I'm not betting anything on the ISCO this week. Heck, I'm not even playing any lineups in DFS for the ISCO this week. I'll root for you though, Jack. That'd be a heck of a story. And it'd get him a PGA Tour card too. So that'd be a pretty cool story too. Actually, I take that back. That last statement about the PGA Tour card, I'm not 100% certain on. I'm not sure if you win this week if you actually get one. Rephrase. Looking at salary, who's too low and been a viable play? I'm still kind of confused by your question, if I'm going to be honest, Sam. But so you're saying, like, how low can you go for a viable play? I guess is your question. Probably about $5,500. If that's what you were asking, that's what I would say. About $5,500. What's going on, Phil? Cheers to you. Got our Chick-fil-A cup here. Best of luck, my friend. I got Gus Carty says, Tom McKibben, a good 7K option. We'll find out this week, man. I tend to be a little bit more hesitant on those young kids, like what you have with McKibben. So I'm going to take a step back. Know he played Valhalla. I know that he's won on the DP World Tour, but I'm a little bit more hesitant. Last matchup question. Hey, you can fire as many as you'd like, Antonio. I love the matchup questions. You've got Spieth versus JT, and you like Jordan Spieth. Yeah, Thomas probably shouldn't be minus 140. I think even money would be the fair line there. So I would lean Jordan Spieth. However, outside of the last 2 events, Jordan Spieth has not hit his irons well at all. Now, the good news for Jordan Spieth and why I think he's still a bet this week and why I take him at plus money is the last few weeks, the irons have been back. He surprisingly has gained a bunch of strokes to the field. So if he continues to do that, he probably whoops Justin Thomas's ass. So yeah, I'm with you on that, man. But I have the true odds at even money there. I think that's probably a coin flip. What do I have for Novak ownership? That's a great question. Let me check for you because I don't know off the top of my head. I know he's sub 10%, but I believe he's getting close to 10%. So let me give you the exact number. I've got him at only 3%. So not that much ownership. I think he should be higher owned, to be quite honest with you. And in fact, 2.9%, ownership concerns, probably not even in the equation there. The concern I would have with Novak, and I'll just tell you I'm not playing him this week, is the fact that he's an AMT time, and there are guys at that same price range that I prefer. And Let me make sure. Yeah, it's not showing the actual projection sheet right now. I'm on another tab looking at it. I'll just tell you, I'm not sure if Victor Perez is somebody that we're going to talk up on this live stream, but I'm playing him. Like he's somebody in that range I like a little bit more. Thoughts on Pavon? The price tag is kind of wild. That's the only issue I have with Pavon is that $6,900 is probably like $500 too expensive. But there are a lot of guys in this range you could say that about. Like McKibben is more expensive than Pavon, which, when you look at it from that lens, it's not quite as bad a misprice. So I'm okay with Pavon. I'm like a 5, maybe a 5.5 out of 10 in terms of like how I'd rate him. But no real lean on him. It's not like I love him, and I certainly don't hate him. I think he's a pretty average play. I love Matt Wallace. So I'm not sure if you saw my betting preview, but he's actually one of the 6 guys that I bet this week. And just to give you guys my outright betting card, it was Matt Wallace. I got him at 125 to 1. I got Thomas Dietrich at 75 to 1. He's going to be chalk, by the way. Thomas Dietrich, I thought he might be like 7.5%. I've got him well over 10% ownership. So that was a little bit of a pipe dream. I bet Max Homa at 65 to 1. I got Sahith Theegala at 60. Minwoo, I got at 30 to 1 to win. And then Ludwig Oberg, I got at 16 to 1 to go out there and win. So I think we got CLV on like all of those plays. And Matt Wallace is one of those guys I really like. It's the form a few weeks ago, right? Everyone was wanting to play Matt Wallace. He's very used to the DP World Tour courses, and he putts well on fescue, which is the surface that we have this week. Woodland could be a sneaky top 25. I think he's a decent course fit. All things considered, he's played pretty well when he's gone over to the, European side of things. I don't know if I'd get there, though. He's struggling since coming back from the brain surgery. He's been okay, though. I mean, he hasn't been horrible. He's still major champion. Potentially the kind of player that actually I'm not even going to say it. He's not. I was going to say maybe a world Hall of Famer, but he's not. Right, the one major is probably not going to get him in. As unfortunate as it is, because he's a great guy, and he's from my hometown here, Delray Beach, down here in South Florida. Thank you for your insights. Appreciate you, Anointed. Thank you for stopping by. Is a lack of driving accuracy or short driving yardage going to be a problem? So the accuracy, no. So this golf course, if you look at missed fairway penalty, is one of the best courses on tour for missing the fairway. It has one of the lowest penalties of any course that they play. So I wouldn't worry about that. Now, the wet golf course, I think, could make the shorter drivers a little bit more of a problem because the course is already like a medium length golf course. You make it soft, you take away some of that run out off the tee, and now you start to have some issues with like 200 plus yard approach shots. So I don't know if I would cross guys off because they're not long off the tee, but I would be more worried about that than them being inaccurate because the missed fairway penalty around the Renaissance Club is one of the lowest that we have. Hoagie, a hidden gem. He's always a hidden gem because of that approach play. He is, per the analytics, like the darling of all the models, and that's why I play him so much, man. Like, if you're a shots gained approach enthusiast, if you're somebody that looks at that for your consistency, then how couldn't you love Tom Hoagie? So I got to say, like, he's always somebody I'm looking at. The course history, it's like non-existent. He hasn't played that much over here and doesn't play that much on the DP World Tour. Any insight on Romain? So Romain Langasque, you keep hearing the name thrown around. He's played really well in 2024. So a lot of the guys that you're hearing about from these touts are the guys that have played pretty well in 2024. And honestly, I'm okay with all of those kind of players. Like if they've shown form here in 2024, if they've gone like a handful of top 10s, top 15 finishes, that's enough for me right there. Like Rosner, that's why I'm playing him, right? Like we're about to go through a few options on here that I'm taking from the DP World Tour. It's kind of what I'm looking for. Now, Langasque, not a guy I'm getting to myself, but if you're telling me that he's got some form, then sure, why not? Am I able to see who the top putters are for slow greens? Yes, I am. I can't bring that up here because I'd have to go into my database, extract a file and do it that way. Is just don't have the time to do it live. So if you want to know after the stream and you're like on my Patreon or Discord, ask me and I can get those to you for sure. Just off the top of my head, some of your better putters on slow greens. I know Rory is like number one in the category by far. He's unbelievably good on slower greens. And let me think about anyone else that just pops. I think Minwoo is one of those top players with the shots game putting. And then Ryan Fox. If you just look at some of the DP World Tour stats for putting, Ryan Fox does unbelievable stuff over there on the DP World Tour. So those would be a few of the guys that I would expect to see there, but I can't give you anything definitively right now, unfortunately. What's going on, TH? He said thoughts on Spieth and Lee Hodges, and is Davis Riley viable? So I think Spieth's a decent course fit, but his form has been atrocious, man. So like, I love the guy. I play him pretty much any chance I can. I'm playing him this week, but I'm doing it in just really like, I don't even know how to explain it. I was going to say I'm like clenching my butthole when I'm playing him, but I guess I'll say it, right? Like, you don't feel good about playing him. You feel like you're going to play him. He's going to miss the cut. He's going to fuck you in the ass and make you, get a 5 of 6 or whatever. However, he did top 10 2 years ago. He plays well at Open Championships. He's a player that when we get soft greens like this is a player that is a plus player to the field. Another guy that, at least just per the eye test, also plays well when you have slow greens. I don't know, not the worst play. Lee Hodges, I'm like at a 3.5 out of 10, I'd say. I'd say I'm a little bit lower than average on Lee Hodges just because he doesn't have a lot of experience with the link style of golf. He, doesn't play much on the DP World Tour, if at all. And then his Open Championship history is also a little bit shoddy. So that's what I'd say about Hodges. I think Spieth has some upside, but like I said, you don't feel great about playing him, man. You're going to feel uncomfortable the entire time. And unless he goes and he shoots like -6 the first day, I mean, he can miss the cut. He'd easily go out there and eject the second day. Grant Forrest chances. He's played well here. And he's a home pro, you're saying. I didn't know that actually, Paul, but great shout there. He played well the year before. And though the form on the DP World Tour has been a little bit suspect in 2024, if you're telling me we got that hometown narrative, this is his home course, then maybe it does work out well for him. So I would say that last year's results combined with that narrative is probably enough to get there for a few lineups. So I have to say, Paul, I was highly considering playing him, and let me double check. I believe he's one of the last few guys that I couldn't get to. I had him down as a yes for the longest time this week, and then very late into my process, I believe I had to take him out. But let me double check on that. Maybe he's still in there. I wanted to play him, that's for sure. Yeah, he was one of the last few guys out. And part of the reason for that, too, is that I don't need somebody that's like $5,300, but I do think he's in play this week for sure. Fairway unders. Yeah, we'll talk about props later, man. So we're going to go through some of the stuff here for DFS first. We're talking about DFS now, not props. Barry says, thoughts on Thigala? Not much talk on him. I took him as one of my outrights, right? So, outside of me, I guess not many people have talked up Sahith this week. A lot of because of the form. He's kind of fallen off a little bit. He's not had a lot of this flashy finishes that makes people want to play him. But I remember a few weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago, that is, where he was one of the chalkiest, hottest players on the PGA Tour. Everyone was betting him outright week in, week out. Everyone was on the Sahith train. I like the upside and I like the course fit. At a course where you're not going to get penalized for missing off the tee, plays directly into his skill set because outside of the driving accuracy, he's world-class in every single category. Any love for the Hogards? Yes, I like both of them. And I'd say I like Nico a little bit more, but Rasmus has been arguably one of the best players on the DP World Tour this year. So he definitely is in play as well. Mike says, Brian Harman or Straka? And you're looking at Showdown, I'm guessing, because you said for tomorrow. I would go Straka. He's likely a little bit cheaper. I'm not sure on the Showdown pricing and about the same ownership, I would imagine, for both of those players. All right, let's talk about some of my highlighted plays. We'll circle back on your questions here after I do so, and then I'll talk about some props. So starting at the top end of the board, I wanted to point out this Rory and Xander ownership mark here. I have both at about 30% ownership. You may have seen my tweet today talking shit about a DFS site out there. Didn't want to name them as, again, I'm just trying to put a PSA out there for people to check their own projections. But if you're on a site and you have ownership projections that have Rory at like 15 to 20% ownership or Xander at like 17, 18% ownership, get a new set of ownership projections. Because the pricing goes the whole way down to $5,000, the sites have to account for that, right? Like with all this extra salary, with the different allocation of their projected ownership, you have to account for that up top. And what we normally see, right, is Scotty's like 50% owned. Well, Scotty's not in this field. So somebody has to get all of that ownership, and it's going to be those top two players. So I've got them as the highest owned players on the slate. That does not mean that you have to fade them in your lineups, but it's worth noting. It's why I made that whole tweet today where I was like, like what are these sites doing when they're not looking at the salary when putting together projections? Because it has a massive impact on how everything is going to work out there. So that's what I'll just say about Rory and Xander. Just know that both are going to be well over 25% ownership. And like I said, and I'll just say it, the site that I was looking at earlier, their average salary that they were using in lineups, which by the way, super easy to calculate. I've shown this calculation countless times on my live stream before, and I'm going to do it again so that you can check all the projected ownership that you have or that you have access to and make sure that they're doing it properly, because this isn't something that's going to take you a long time to do it either. This is a 30-second process. Okay. So what you do, and I'm not going to be able to like type the formulas out because I have everything blacked out, is you take this projected ownership number, right? 31.5, and you multiply it by their DraftKings salary. So what you're going to do on Excel, and I know this is probably super simple, but some people, older, maybe don't know Excel as well. You go over here in this quadrant, you type equals this box multiplied by this box, right? And you drag it down, right? You sum up all of these and see what the number is. What it should be is close to $50,000, because what you're doing by multiplying this projected ownership by their salary is getting an in theory number of how much salary that they're using up, right? And in theory, people use all of their salary. Like you're not going to see a lot of people that leave over $500 on the table. In fact, it's like sub 0.5% of lineups. So 99.5% of lineups that are spending over $49,500. There was a site out there. Again, I'm not going to name them. You could DM me on Twitter, DM me on Discord, and I'll tell you who the hell they are. I do not care. I'll talk shit all I want. Won't do it publicly, though. They're, again, just legal reasons for that. Site, though, had $47,500, implying that people are going to leave on average $2,500 on the table. Your site, by the way, if you add this up and that's the case, are utter fucking morons. I'm not going to scoff words at that. This is where I will use profanity from time to time. Is when I'm getting very passionate about something, they're fucking morons. They have no idea what they're doing. And if their ownership is that far off, I can't imagine what else is far off, because that is very fundamental. That is very easy to put together. It's something that you should know immediately when putting together ownership projections. And if you're publishing that kind of information, I just wonder what else has to be wrong out there with whatever site that you're looking at. So, and it's not just one site that is the issue with that, by the way. There are plenty of sites that do it. There are some, by the way, that won't, they'll spend $47,500, and then there'll be some that spend $52,000, right? That somehow have an extra whole $2,000 to spend. So do that check if you need to. Again, if you need actual directions on how to do it, just ask me on Twitter, ask me on my Discord for my DMs or whatever, and I'll walk you through the process to go out there and check it yourself. I obviously check that for all of mine, so you can double check them if you'd like, right? I do it for every single slate because it literally impacts the projections that I put out, right? Like I have to tinker them to make sure that they're using enough or not too much salary out there in my lineup. So that's it for the DFS talk. We're going to talk about some of these other players, but yeah, like these two guys up top, the reason why I wanted to use that as a segue is like, if you have them at 18% ownership, there's literally no way to spend all of your salary. There's not. Unless you have no ownership in the 5K range at all, or like no ownership in the 6K range. And we know that there's guys down there that are going to get played this week. So it's just like, that's the PSA of the week when it comes to ownership, guys, is check it, make sure that they're doing it right, and vet whoever you're getting your projections from. And if I have to be the guy that goes out there and exposes how to check projections, it just makes sure that they're done right on the fundamental basis, then I'll be that guy, right? Because I'm totally comfortable with people checking my projections, right? Checking the accuracy of the R-squared of them because they're great. I do that myself, right? It's something that I'm doing week in and week out. These other sites, it is very clear that that does not happen, that they aren't being vetted, that they aren't being looked at all by their subscribers. And that worries me as just like a human being, like that people are getting bamboozled by that kind of stuff. So once again, if you need to know the site, let me know. And it's not even just one. I'll let you know the one that I'm talking about, but there are a handful that are all very guilty of that same thing. All right, let's move on. That's enough of the shit talking. Let's catch up on chat so I can figure out what we're doing here. Then we'll talk through the rest of these plays. Where we at? Who would I take, Wiesberger or Ferguson? I'd go Ferguson. I like him a little bit more. You got Rasmus Højgaard, but you got love for Zalatoris too. Zalatoris is a tough one this week. That's all I'll say about it. The form atrocious, but he's a much better player. So yeah, he's a tough one for me this week. Yeah, you went Wiesberger, fair play. He's won here before. Deacon says, what's up, Luke? Apologize if you've already answered it, but what are my thoughts on Billy Ho? No real thoughts there, I'll say, on Billy Horschel. He's played okay over here at like Open Championships, Scottish Opens in the past. And just like Ricky Fowler, he has played quite a few of them when it was a DP World Tour event. So I'm at like a 6 out of 10 on him, Deacon. Not my favorite play, but I'm higher on him than most, I would say, just because he's comfortable with the DP World Tour and he's playing much better golf recently than what he's done in the past. Are you crazy, or is this a good spot for Wyndham? He's played well here. He gains over 2 strokes per round, actually, around the Renaissance Club, partially because he played it when it was a DP World Tour event a little bit. And he's come alive a little bit. He's still top 5 on tour and birdie or better percentage. Very much so in play. Damn intrigued about the site? Just let me know. I'll let you know, man. Best sites for golf pick'em choices. If you're saying to go out there and like find plays, there's no site that's going to give you projections that are great. You need to be doing your projections yourself. That's what I do, right? When I go out there and make my plays. So I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. Maybe you're asking like the best site to play props on. If that's the case, Underdog's my favorite. But yeah, if you're talking about like finding plays to use, it's not that I look at, that's for sure. I do everything in-house. What's going on, David? Thoughts on Ryan Fox? Great play. I like the putting on fescue greens, and he's playing well on the PGA Tour, which means now that he's going up against those DP World Tour players, I think he's going to clearly outclass them this time around. Let's see. Even Ferguson won last week, and he's not very chalky. Yeah, that's why I'm playing him. That's why I said that I preferred him over the other one there, because he's a winner. He's coming in with some of the best form that you can imagine. He's a Scot. Right, he's somebody that is going to have a lot of national pride on the line this week, and he's not chalky. So I think he's sneaky, man. I'm there with you, absolutely. All right, so Victor Hovland at sub 20%. Victor seems to be back, right? We take a look at the shots gain metrics, and you're seeing a lot of positive out there with Victor Hovland. He's gaining about a stroke per round off the tee, over 3/4 of a stroke per round with the approach play. So though the around the green has gone a little bit awry, now he's back with Joe Mayo, right? His short game coach. So I'm expecting that to come along at some point, if not sooner rather than later. And with the soft conditions, the fact that this golf course, I think, is going to play to, I don't want to call it a birdie fest, but kind of a birdie fest out there this week. I think that plays directly into his skill set. So definitely a guy I was kind of looking at on Monday, but now that I know he's going to be relatively low owned and with the softer conditions, made him somebody that I was willing to get to. Also worth noting that he is an AM wave player. So I do think that the PM AM guys, if you're just joining us, are getting the better side of things, but still in play for me though. Next up, we got Sanjay M at $8,500. I've got him at 13.3%, which is higher ownership than guys like a Brian Harmon, higher ownership than guys like a Corey Connors, but he's lower owned than guys like an Aaron Rye. So in that kind of case, right, like I think that he's about adequately owned with like that 13 to 15% number. But considering that he's top 10 in the field when it comes to recent form ranking, he's a player that I think fits this golf course when he's playing his best golf, makes a lot of sense at $8,500. And unlike what we had with Hovland, is an PM wave player. We've got Siwoo Kim here at $7,500. He's a player that is playing a lot better in 2024 than really we've ever seen from him in the past. And even when he didn't have the best form, wasn't the most consistent player, he would spike winning performances. So though I don't think it's like a perfect course fit, he is at least a PM wave option and a player that is coming in with some of the better tee to green form of anyone in the field. Add a little bonus with Siwoo is that he tends to play well when courses are very soft. And that's what we're going to have for at least the first 2 days. I also want to point out Ferguson, who I know we've had some questions about, but yeah, I've got him at 5.3% ownership. So I know that some people were asking about him before they knew I was going to bring him up, but he is one of my favorite plays of the week, a PM wave option, and is coming in off a win, which is huge out there for his prospects. We've also got Seamus Power that I want to point out, who is an AM wave player. Seamus Power is a guy that's played quite a bit on the DP World Tour. He's sub 5% owned, so definitely somebody you could take for some leverage. And the form hasn't been earth-shattering, but he's number 32 in the field, which is very respectable for being about number 50 in the pricing, down there at $6,400. So yeah, sub 5% on, not an ideal tee time. I'd prefer if he was a PM AM guy, but still somebody that I'd take for some leverage. Last 2 plays we're going to go through, actually might be 3 that we're going to go through, but Guido Migliozzi, winner about a few starts ago out there on the DP World Tour, a guy that I've always loved to play because first off, Guy's got a great name. He's a high upside player from the DP World Tour. He makes a ton of birdies. So the reason why I love him in particular is I bet him a lot for birdie or better matchups on the DP World Tour, and he would crush people. Like even players like Rory, he'd be matched up against on Prize Picks from time to time and go out there and get the job done. So I love Guido. He makes a ton of birdies, an extremely aggressive player that's not going to hold back. And on a soft golf course, that's where he won a few weeks ago. So now that we're getting him at this softer Scottish Open, I think he's squarely in play this week. Next up, we've gotten, it's our last play. I thought there might have been two more, but this will be our last one for the highlighted plays, is in Antoine Rosner at $5,600. What I like about Rosner is his plethora of top 20 finishes in 2024. The kind of guy that he'll miss some cuts. He's got a wide range of outcomes, but when he plays well, he tends to make it count with a top 20. And at $5,600, a top 15 is likely what we're looking for. Top 10 would pretty much seal it up for in terms of being an optimal play. He has upside for that, even in a stronger field against some PGA Tour players. So, and if you're looking at the shots gained metrics, in the small sample that we have for these DP World Tour guys, he's the number 3 course fit, which is just like crazy stuff, right? He's number 3 in course fit out of everyone in the field, right? Not just those DP World Tour guys, which is very interesting for somebody at $5,600. So those are some of the highlighted plays, right? We already talked a lot about lineup construction before, but this is the kind of week with these DP World Tour guys down low to get different, right? Like I know we mentioned Tom McKibben a few times in questions, but like he's the kind of like the opposite of one of these DP World Tour guys that we want to get to. We want to be looking at the low-owned, sneaky plays that are coming across the pond. Players that are maybe a little bit more expensive than they should be, or maybe even a little bit more chalky than they should be. In my opinion, I'm being careful with them, right? And I think that you should probably be a little bit careful as well. Doesn't mean that you can't play any of those options, but those, shiny new toys on the block really aren't all that much different than some of the other DP World Tour guys we've talked about. And I mean, some of them are coming in off a recent win and are going to be like 3-4 times lower owned and are oftentimes cheaper than some of those guys that are getting a little bit more steam. So that's what I would say about this week is, up top, your PGA Tour chalk is pretty much unavoidable. There are going to be some guys that are, in that 8, 9, 10K range that you're going to be playing at, in some cases, like 30% ownership with these two guys up top. Down low, don't fall into the trap of playing all the super popular DP World Tour guys. If you're going to try and take some shot on European Tour players to get different, do it on the guys that are sub 5% owned, right? Don't do it on the guys that are going to be the talk of the town, like a Tom McKibben. So that's what I'll say about ownership in GPPs this week. Up top, I think it's pretty much unavoidable to take some chalk. Just those middle lower tier ranges, make sure you're being intentional, I should say, about getting different to the field and force in a few pivots. I'm going to circle back to the Draftkings side now, and we're going to build a lineup together real quickly. Afterwards, we're going to talk through props, which I've got a bunch of props that have already entered. So excited to talk through that. I'm also going to have to bring up our stat averages, but we'll do that here in a minute. Where are we at? Yeah, so I'm not playing the alternate at all, Sam. I'm probably not even going to watch the ISCO, if I'm being quite honest with you. Golf course is not the most interesting. Keen Trace, not my favorite. And this event with the schedule that I'm on, pretty much only going to be the combined event for me. Shouldn't this be a good spot for Hovland? I agree. Yes. That's why I'm playing him this week. Hovland can use the putter around the green. That's huge for him. I didn't think about that, Pam, and you're right about it. That link style setup, kind of similar to Pinehurst, where everything is shaved off. Now, he won't be able to do that out of the bunkers, of course, but when he's on that shaved off fairway area, you're 100% spot on. So great take there, and actually it makes me like him a little bit more. Thank you for answering the question. Of course, man. And do I see the course having a low-end total? Or do I think it'll be like high scoring? I actually think you're going to see quite a few birdies. So with the softer conditions, the lack of wind the first few days, I think it could very well play to like a -15 to -18 winning score. So it's not going to be like the John Deere by any means, but I don't think it's going to be the -7 that one with Xander's year. Yeah, you love Seamus Power. Me too. Yeah, we're going to talk underdog here in a minute. And the underdog side, I have quite a few props that I like. Some of them have gone bumped, but I think a few are still left over. Jordan L. Smith, I like him, Sam. He's one of those guys coming from the DP World Tour that's playing well. I believe he had a second place finish his last time out, if memory serves me correctly. And he's not super chalky or super expensive like some of the other options. So yeah, I'm all in on him. He's one of the guys that I think is definitely in play this week. The guys I would be a little bit more hesitant about are the ones that are the higher owned ones, right? Connor Syme and Alex Fitzpatrick are two great Euro pivots. So, yeah, I don't know as much about Connor. I know a lot about Alex Fitzpatrick, though, so I'll 100% agree with you on that one. And he said he actually liked him more than his brother. I don't know if we want to take it that far. Now, if you're considering price, right, then it's a different argument. Then I'm maybe with you there. Connor, though, I'll keep an eye on him this week. I don't know enough about him. I think he's a Scottish player, huh? If memory serves me correctly, he's Scottish. I know he's DP World Tour for sure. Keep riding Cole. Yeah, dude, he's playing so much better. I honestly couldn't talk you off of it if he wanted to keep riding Cole. And yeah, last year, the stat profile looks the exact same. So I'd have a hard time talking you off of him. Any Eagles outlook? So yeah, I'm not a big Eagles guy. I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler guy for sure. Being over there on that side, I will start thinking about football a little bit more in the next few weeks here. I think they're going to have a decent year. Honestly, if I had to give you they're probably going to make a wild card, I'd guess, if I had to guess where they're going to end up making it to the playoffs or not. Cowboys probably going to win that division if you had to ask me. That's what I'll say about that. I think they're okay. I don't want to talk shit because I have a lot of friends that are Eagles fans. So if they hear me say that, they're going to be like, oh, what about the Steelers then? Hey, just because I said that the Eagles weren't going to do well does not mean that I said that Steelers were going to do well. So just keep that in mind, right? Do I prefer Rye or Clark? If you need to get different, for sure, Clark. If you're in a spot where ownership's not a big concern either direction, I think it's pretty close to a 50-50, but long-term, I think Clark's the better player, so I would side towards him even in that kind of situation. Now, if you're in that situation, though, it's a lot more of a conversation than if you need to get different. If you need to get different, it's 100% going to be Wyndham Clark. Concerned about Sahith since he was having a checkered scorecard. It's kind of his thing, right? When he's missing off the tee, he mixes in far too many bogeys. So there's a lot of concern there with anyone, I would say, around this style of golf course. But, it's just been a few bad weeks. I don't think I'd look into it that much. Everyone's going to have those issues. What's going on, Jackson? Any Davis Thompson love? And sorry if I talked about it. I didn't. So it's a great question, Jackson. Even if you did, I'd still give you a little information, right? I'm not going to hold it against you if you're just hopping in here. I would say that I project him well this week. So I want to start with that. He projects well. He feels like a dude's robot is a great way to describe it. He doesn't have bad weeks anymore. His ball striking has seemingly gotten a lot better. However, you could probably tell the however was coming, by the way. However, it's Davis Thompson. I have a hard time thinking that he's just some different player now. And that kind of thought process where, I'm a little bit skeptical about these guys going on a hot run has paid off in droves over the last few years, right? Like not overreacting to the hot commodity. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm a little hesitant on Davis Thompson. I will say that my projections, my modeling, all of that kind of stuff loves Davis Thompson. So if you're a numbers guy, if you're just playing the model, you play him this week, the experienced golf DFS player in me kind of knows that the letdown's coming though, right? It might not happen this week. It doesn't happen this week. It's probably happening next time out. He's kind of due for that, right? And I hate to say that he's due, but it's reality. They kind of are. Is Loin a sneaky play? Yeah, dude, he get kept out of the Olympics, huh? He's probably going to be a little bit pissed out there. I think that I like him this week, Sam, because you're on the Patreon. So yeah, I'm playing him, right? Crocker could be a cracker. He's a high ownership, 2.1%. I've heard a lot of people talk about him this week. I've heard that he's got some decent form, right? Like some of those other DP World Tour players. So I'm not as familiar with him as maybe some other people are going to be. But if you're telling me that he's coming in with, some top 20s, some top 10s, sure, why not, right? What's going on, Cody? He said, thoughts on Harmon? Low owned. If you're looking for a low owned option in the 8K range, he is your guy. Hope you had a nice fourth. I did. Cheers to you on that. We were up at the beach for a few days up there. So we were able to get out on a boat, able to go out to the beach for a few days. And I got sunburnt to shit. So other than that, it was great. Tom Kim versus Homa versus Pavon. Looks like a good 3-ball matchup. Ooh, I have to take an eye on that. I kind of like Homa there, right? Homa's probably the one I'd be looking at. Any thoughts on JT? So sneakily, probably a pretty good JT course. I have to say, of anyone on the PGA Tour this year, I feel like I've gotten Justin Thomas wrong more than any other player on the PGA Tour. So I will say, Pam, that I kind of wanted to not talk about him because It feels like every time I say that JT is a good play, he sucks. And every time that I don't mention him, he goes out there and has a really good week. So the fact that I don't want to talk about it tells you what I'm doing with him. So we're just going to leave it there. I'm not going to say what I think about him because I think I've been jinxing him a little bit. So we'll see how it works out. And if you need to know what I'm doing, just ask me on Twitter or on Discord, and I'll tell you. But you probably know, right? What's going on, Mike? He said, good luck to y'all. Absolutely, you as well. Blake says, thoughts on Marcel Siem. So like a few of the other DP World Tour players, he's one of the few guys that's actually shown something this year, that's gone out there, posted some top 10 finishes. He's also a guy that makes a lot more birdies than his counterparts. Kind of like Guido Migliozzi is one of the higher birdie or better percentage players on the DP World Tour. So I like him for DFS. I like him if he can make the cut to go out there and make a bunch of birdies. So he fits that kind of narrative. And yeah, let's keep quiet because you're in the same boat. Yeah, there are a few guys, Pam, that if I even so much as say one thing about, like in saying that like a positive thing, they just have the worst week ever. And then the weeks where I play them and I just don't say a word about it, they crush. It's like clockwork. So yeah, we'll keep it quiet, huh? What's going on, Sam? You said feels like so many mispriced Euro guys. There are, but keep in mind, Sam, that it's a step down in talent level, right? This isn't a DP World Tour event, and I think a lot of us forget that the top 10 this week is going to take a lot more than the top 10 in a DP World Tour event. So I think that in some cases it is substantiated, but like the few guys that I mentioned, I think there are plenty of misprices too. So I agree with you, Samuel, but be a little careful with that, right? Don't go too overboard with the DP World Tour guys, or else you're gonna play too many of them, in my opinion. All right, let's go through a lineup together. So like I wanted to do before we talked about props was give you just my thought process when putting together a large field GPP lineup. And for the sake of this, we're going to do it for the big $25. So this is going against nearly 38,000 other entries. And in this kind of contest, we've really got to be looking at ownership. We've got to be worrying about getting different to the field and finding spots to move up on the leaderboards. So if I'm starting a lineup, I'm okay going with the Ludwig Ahlberg, but I kind of want to consider who would be the lowest owned option up top. And if you're going to try and get different this week, I think there's two ways that you can do it. You can either go hyper balanced or super studs and duds. If you're going to go super studs and duds, maybe you start in Ahlberg, and then, sorry, it wasn't meant to be Morikawa. It was meant to be McIlroy and then Ahlberg as the second man in. This would be obviously a very aggressive way to start your lineup, but the reality is up top that you're going to be eating players with ownership. The way to try and get quote unquote different up top would be to do it with lineup construction, right? Either go 2 super big spend ups or completely skip the 10K range and go down there to the 9s. If you do that, I don't think that many people are going to be doing that in their builds. And then the vice versa, right? If you're going to go hyper aggressive up top, I do think that there are going to be some lineups that build that way, but not as many that are going a little bit more balanced. It's not that you have to get different up top. If you do want to take the more traditional route and just take one spend up, one 9K and move on, you can still make that work because you've got the other 3-4 spots in your lineup to find leverage spots in that 6, 7, and 8K range. So it's not like you have to force in this kind of lineup construction, but if you do, it could be a way to force yourself for, a different combination of 6 players. So your second man in this kind of build can still be an 8K range player, or sorry, third man in this kind of lineup can still be an 8K range player, but that is going to force us really down to at least 1, maybe even 2 6K range players. So for the sake of this lineup, I'm going to throw Sungjae Im in there, which does post us the whole way down to $6,300. And I'm going to throw Antoine Rosner in there, down there at $5,600. So obviously a player that I was comfortable getting to in that range. And I'm also going to throw in a Victor Perez into this kind of lineup. So we've got Rosner at $5,600. The other Frenchman, again, just coincidental, and I'm taking 2 Frenchmen together there. But I'm going to take those 2 in the lineup to offset that salary. So we're now up to $7,200 for our last man in, which, for the sake of this stream, we're going to, cut off the lineup here just because DraftKings kind of frowns upon you going through all 6 players for a lineup. But you can see at $7,200, at 70, at that exact price tag, actually, there's a guy that I love as one of my value plays for this week. So it's far from an impossible build to get to. And that's even taking 2 guys that are over $10,000. If you go more balanced about it, which I think a lot more people are going to do, it's more comfortable, right? You don't have to take an Antoine Rosner. Maybe rather than taking, and Rory as your first guy. Maybe you start with Aberg and your second man in was like a Hovland at $9,700. It does give you a little bit more freedom with those last two options. So maybe rather than taking a Rosner, right, you're able to spend up and take, a Seamus Power instead. And then your last man in that kind of lineup would be the whole way up at $8,600. So I just think a lot more people are going to feel comfortable with this kind of build as opposed to the one that is slightly more aggressive up top. The other end of this, right, would be to start with a Hovland. So if you were starting with Hovland, I mean, you're going to have to really get different with your last few spots, but you can play 4 guys towards the top. So just to show you that, I'm going to throw in a Hovland, a Fleetwood, and a Minwoo Lee. And even with those 3 players, and we got Seamus in there at $6,400, we'll just take them out just for the sake of this year. We're at $7,000 remaining. This is extremely viable. I think you have a bunch of guys that have top 5, top 10 equity. And as long as one of these 10K options doesn't win, you can be in the driver's seat out there for your lineup construction as well. So sorry, I didn't mean to stop sharing my screen there, but that's the idea up top. I don't think you have to get different with lineup construction, but in my book, there are 2 clear ways to do it. Either double spend up or go extremely balanced about it. And I don't think that either one is going to be particularly popular. And by extremely balanced, by the way, I mean skipping the top end of the board, right? Taking a bunch of guys that are in that 8, 9K range and then rounding it off with 2 players in the 7s. Let's see if there's any last second DFS stuff. If not, we're going to talk about props, which speaking of, I need to bring up our stat averages. So I will do so as we yap about a few questions together. I did them on Monday, I believe. So I'm going to have to go into the archives to find this screenshot, but we should be able to find it. I think that's it. Let's see. Hopefully. Yes, it is. Look at that. First try. Okay. Let me make it a little bit bigger and we'll catch up on these questions here in a second. All righty. Voila, and there we go. All right. So where did we leave off? Keep quiet then. Oh, that's right. We were already there with the same boat. Yep. Where we at? Dietrich, a good course fit. Yes, Robin. I actually bet him outright this week for some of my exposure at 75-1. The one thing I'll say is that I think everyone knows that he's a good course fit. Before this was a DP World Tour event, he found some success. And then over the last 2 seasons, he has also found success in this being a DP World Tour / PGA Tour event. So he's I think he's going to be a popular play. I have him over 10% projected ownership, but he is somebody that I bet outright and that I think is going to play particularly well this week. You got Hovland, JT start as well. Yeah, if you went with that start, like a Hovland JT start, that would be super balanced. I mean, your average salary remaining there would be $7,800, maybe $7,900. That would be, like I said, that'd be hyper balanced, and I think that'd be a lot different to the field. That's for sure. All right, let's talk about some prop stuff. So in terms of this golf course, I think it's going to play easier than what we saw last year. Main reason for that is some rain that's come through the area, and then especially tomorrow afternoon, they're not calling for much wind at all. So when we take a look at this forecast over here, you see in the morning, it's 8, maybe 10 miles an hour. In the afternoon, they have it dropping to 4 or 5 miles an hour. If that's going to be the case, I do think the PM guys maybe get the slightly better end of the spectrum. But even these AM wave players are going to be playing an easier golf course than what we had last year. So though it's nice to look at these stat averages, I do think they're almost all going to improve. In fact, for a scoring average in round 1, I think it's going to be between 1/4 and 3/4 of a stroke under par. So a little bit better than what we had last year potentially, but that is before the cut line is going to be made. And because this is a DP World Tour half event, right, there's a lot of lower tier players that aren't used to playing in these PGA Tour events. So I do think that your elite tier players are going to play significantly better than that field average, a lot of because of those DP World Tour guys that were getting mixed in. So though the birdie average, for example, right, was only 3.38 per round, for the guys that are on the underdog board, for example, Prize Picks board does have a few scrubs that are mixed in, but in general, I think they're making at least 4 birdies per round out there on Thursday, right here for tonight. Partially because of the weather, but also because they're just better players than some of those lower tier DP World Tour guys that are going to tank down that average. And same thing for the bogeys, right? Bogeys or worse was 2.90 per round. Your player that is on the board that is a better than average player is going to be closer to 2 bogeys per round. So that's why I think that there's some value for some unders on strokes and potentially some overs on birdies as well. So speaking of, let's go through some of those props. So I know Prize Picks is going to have a lot of options for us, but let's start on underdog where they've started to get a little bit bump heavy. So the one prop I know that hasn't moved was an under on Sahith Theegala strokes. And then we're going to pair him up here with a Victor Hovland under on strokes, just because a lot of the other props I took on Underdog have moved. So this was actually a prop that I took on Prize Picks for my exposure, but it's at the same number on both sites, so it doesn't really matter, right? Where we're mixing in for the case of this live stream. So the thought process here is that, first off, getting to a -2 round is, I think, going to be very regular for these guys that are on this Underdog board. If I think the scoring average for the field is going to be like 0.5 under par, well, a guy like Sahith and Victor Hovland that is likely going to gain a stroke, maybe a stroke and a half, 2 strokes to the field on average to the field, is going to project well better than these stat averages. So in a few cases, like Victor Hovland, for example, is at 67.5 on books. I believe Sahith Theegala is at 68.5, and he is even money. I just don't think that they're accounting for these conditions, right? Especially the fact that the PM is likely going to play easier than the morning. Somebody like Sahith, right? He's got the 8:10 a.m. local time. This is when he's teeing off for me, right? So obviously over there in Scotland, that's a PM tee time because they're 5 hours ahead. Those players that are playing with no wind tomorrow, it wouldn't surprise me if their scoring average was a whole stroke under par. So for him to cover this kind of line is essentially asking him to gain 1 stroke to the field. Victor Hovland, for him to tie, right, it's asking him to like gain 1 stroke to the field. This sort of player, right, is projecting for like 2 shots gained per round. So if I was making the projections here on Underdog for round 1, I would probably have Victor Hovland at 67 strokes, and I'd probably have Sahith Theegala at 67.5, at worst at 68 strokes. So I do think there's some value on both of these players, and a lot of because of how much rain that they've gone in this area. Next up on Prize Picks, we're going to go through a few props over here. So we're going to take this over on Ludwig Aubert birdies, and we're going to mix it in with this over on Sungjae Im birdies. So there were a few other props that I took on the site. Actually, nothing's bumped on Prize Picks yet, which is kind of great. Last week, they were super bump heavy, so it's nice that they've come down to earth a little bit. The over on Ludwig is about even money on Caesars and Fanduel, and I don't think Sungjae has a line. So they do have some guys on the board on like Caesars and Fanduel, like a Jordan, for example. Some of the other guys on the board, like a Sepp Straka, I believe, is over there on Fanduel. They have it 4.5 and juiced under. So, they're at 4 birdies. I actually kind of considered taking somebody like a Jordan for over on birdies. But Ludwig, who's even money on that site, I just disagree with the line, right? I don't think they're accounting for the rain, just like I was saying with some of the strokes lines. So though he's about even money on books, I personally have Ludwig projected for just over 5 birdies per round. Sungjae, for example, I have projected for like 4.35 birdies per round. So both pretty solid edges. I'd say the Aberg prop a little bit more of a favorite for me, just because it has a higher hit rate than what we have with Sungjae. Sungjae, of course, though, has a lot of push equity, right? So that's what's kind of great about him being at 4, is that maybe he doesn't have as much over equity, but he does have all that push equity on the table out there at -2. Or sorry, I'd say 4 birdies, not -2, out there versus projection. That's why I took those 2 overs. So again, a lot of it is because of the rain that they've gone. They've gone over an inch of rain this week. And then on top of that, some pretty tame winds out there for Scotland. So I guess the one thing I'll say for props is that obviously keep an eye on conditions if you're waking up and watching the play. If you're going to be up at like 3, 4 a.m. like I am, right, watching the play, you can probably find some pretty sweet value out there for the PM players. Right? If it plays easier than expected, right, maybe go out there and hammer some extra unders on, strokes, overs on birdies, or maybe if it's playing harder than expected, which is possible, right? Maybe I'm wrong about conditions. I mean, I've been wrong before. I'm going to be wrong again, right? Just full transparency, right? I'm not Nostradamus out here. If it plays harder than I expect, best know that I'm going to go out there and take some fades, right? I'm not just going to marry myself to the wrong idea. So be willing to adapt to some of the conditions that we see. And the reason why I throw that out there, I mean, that's always the case on tour. But the reason why I mentioned it this week is Scotland's got some pretty crazy weather, right? The weather forecast can change on a dime out there in this part of the world. So don't go too overboard with your exposure, right? I would say for a vast majority of your exposure in round 1, I'd probably wait until after it starts, right? Get an idea for the conditions, because it's a full field event. You have a whole AM wave and a whole PM wave. You can use the AM guys as your guinea pig, right? To go out there and see how conditions look. And then afterwards, go out there and add some exposure. So just like the Patreon sheets that you guys see with all my content posted, if you want all the slips that I'm entering and all the live ones that I'm getting to, make sure to check out the Patreon page for that. That's all I've got for this live stream, though, outside of looking at this pick 6 board, which I haven't looked at all yet. So I guess we'll take a peek at that side of things. So for pick 6, let's take a look at the round 1 stuff. They've got a bunch of guys at 4.5 birdies. A Rory at 4.5. kind of seems like a pretty nice spot to get to. They actually have some guys at 3.5 birdies, which is a nice little added bonus that I wasn't expecting. So maybe a Siwoo Kim at 3.5 can make quite a bit of sense there as well. And then for strokes, it's a lot of the same kind of lines that we have on the other site, but JT got bumped down from 68.5 down to 68 on a lot of sites. So maybe you could lock them in without that bump over there on DraftKings. So in terms of the pick 6 board, these would be my favorite 3 leans. And if I was just going to make this a 2-man like what we had on the other sites, I'd go with this Rory over and this JT under. Off memory, I think Rory was like minus 140 towards the over for his birdies on Caesars and Fanduel. So you're getting a little bit of line value there. And then with this Justin Thomas prop, he's minus 155 towards his under on DraftKings. So both props are squarely into the plus EV window. So if you're somebody that likes to do that for your prop exposure, probably not the worst idea. The only issue here with a pick 6 is that the payouts get altered based on the other people's success. So I would imagine that these 2 plays are going to be pretty popular out there for round 1. So that would be pretty much the only downside to taking those 2 plays. Let's see. You wonder what site and what does it rhyme with? Just DM me, man. I'm not going to say it out here on the stream, but if you DM me on Twitter, my DMs are open, right? I don't have to follow you for you to DM me. Same thing on Discord. Like if you're like on my Patreon or something, just ask me. I'll let you know, man. I've let like 30 people know today. Right? I threw that out there in my tweet. I said, hey, if you want to know what it is, just let me know. 100% I'll hook you up, man. It's kind of sad when you hear who it is too, because they're maybe the biggest name in our industry, unfortunately. And a lot of like the TV broadcast people use it, which is crazy. All right, where are we at? Thoughts on Max Homa? I bet him outright, so I love him this week. Agree on the wait and see how it plays? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, man. And you're saying then pair it with Brian over birdies for the PGA Tour. Ooh, is it Wesley Bryan you're talking about? Yeah, I saw some of the Keen Trace stuff. So he's at 4.5. Yeah, dude, that course, by the way, the reason why I'm not watching it is it's a joke. Right? They have like Haynes Springer and Chan Kim at 5.5 birdies. Like it's Chan Kim of all people. Carson Young at 5. Like it's a wild. But yeah, you're right, dude. That's a birdie fest. Not the worst idea to take it over on birdies. That's for damn sure. Good stuff, of course. Appreciate you, Steven. And yeah, he's a cash cow. He's been playing well, man. You saw, right? Because you follow my stuff, Sean, but I've been playing him a lot as well. So right there with you, man. I think that's a sharp take. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for this live stream. Went a little bit longer than expected, but just wanted to give you guys all that information as per usual. So hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared out there for all of your exposure and go out there and crush it for me. Make me proud out there with your exposure. So take down a GPP or 2, cash out on this prop slips, and tune in for the Patreon for all the content throughout the weekend. On top of the Patreon content, where you can find my player poll, projections for DFS like you saw on that spreadsheet. You can also get all of my prop exposure. We're also going to have round 2 through 4 live streams this week. So that'll be on YouTube. That is not behind the paywall. So if you enjoyed this live stream, you found it helpful for your exposure, first off, subscribe. Also hit that like button, but also make sure to stop on by for those round 2 through 4 streams, because we're doing the same thing for those single round slates. And of course, afterwards out there for the prop side. So that's all I've got. I'm going to let my cat do the outro here, and we'll hop on out of here. It's the fat cat this time. It's not the one that's black. So the black cat, some people will say, is like bad luck. I don't buy that, first of all. This cat is the fat, lucky cat. So hopefully it'll give us a lot of luck this week, guys.